Good morning.
Hey, hey.
Today, not my studio, not my
Mm-hmm.
office. I'm here with Ofentse Pitse.
Correct.
So I said to her, I'm handing over the studio today to you
Mm-hmm.
today because I really am a student, like
Mm-hmm.
a true student in this respect. As I typically do, my name is Buyima Foko. I'm a seasoned entrepreneur, a luxury consultant, as well as a speaker, setting out to contribute to Africa's luxury growth. Africa and Luxury Offense is as I was briefing you behind the scenes, is a luxury education platform. And really, what we're setting out to do, even with this conversation, is chronicling the story and the history of Africa,
Yeah.
the beauty, drawing context and connection with the tastemakers. And
Mm-hmm.
naturally, you're one of them. I've been fangirling Ofense, guys. I'm grateful she agreed to this conversation because
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm on every comment on your LinkedIn because that's where I'm most active. But also, you've
Yes.
just been doing really phenomenal work.
Mm-hmm.
So in each episode, we're really just drawing context from the richness of the continent, the culture, the vibrancy, the beauty, the
Mm-hmm.
music, which is the topic of our discussion today. And today we're talking about pioneering change with Offensive. Um, I will not introduce her because I think I often sit with bios that I'm sent by management teams
Mm-hmm.
before the conversations. And this one was it really resonated with me because it's a true story of Africa, of an African child, a girl,
Mm-hmm.
a woman that emerges to become this icon, this globally renowned icon. And um, a true pioneer, Ufenze is an orchestra owner, a conductor, classical music arranger, producer, musician, and curator of intimate, musically inspired, and influenced spaces and experiences. You've seen her work at all, you would have caught the sentiment. She draws her inspiration from the matriarchs in her life, giving reverence to both her mother and grandmother. Love. Born and raised in Mabopane, and depending on where you're viewing or listening to this episode from, that is in Gauteng, which is in Pretoria, Johannesburg, well, Pretoria, South
Yeah.
Africa.
Yeah.
And born and raised in Mabopane, her love for music was born from the exposure to the Salvation Army's brass band, which her family were active members of. It is here that she learned to play the English horn, the trumpet, the flugelhorn, and the cornet, and expanded her repertoire beyond this to include gospel, classical, and jazz music. We'll get into all of it. All of this has happened under the mentorship and tutelage of the country's two leading conductors, Tami Zungu and Geben Groeten.
Mm-hmm.
She's on a continuous journey of self mastery, with education being a central and pervasive theme for her life. She deems herself a creative academic drawn from her passion for art in Africa, a befitting guest for the platform, ensuring that she ensures that each project takes on an innovative and academic excellence.
Yeah.
Darling,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to be very stimulated this morning,
Mm-hmm. I
being an
hope so.
academic
I hope
myself.
so.
Absolutely.
Can only
I
hope.
can't
Yeah.
wait to get in.
Mm-hmm.
Ufenza has managed to masterfully create a brand that truly reflects her core values, characters, people, and heart, all of which are vital ingredients for a history making change agent and not rising girl, you're there. She's risen.
Mm-hmm.
Influential cultural voice. I suppose we never really reached where we're going
Sure.
when we're serving humanity,
Mm-hmm.
and a key player in the orchestral world. The path she's on transcends boundaries, and she's made notable boundaries that are made notable by these key career milestones and collaborations. Phew, what a list, but all worth mentioning. She, in the inaugural Veuve Clicquot Bold Women Awards, was one of the speakers, and she was recognized for her impact and influence. Also, Chanel, as she was telling me behind the scenes, she was celebrated last year also for her contribution to arts and the work that she does continuously. This is my introduction to. This is where I met her. If you know Netflix and if you love Shonda Rhimes, she conducted. Did you just conduct or did you arrange
I was part of the direction of the
the
arrangements. So I
direction
was
of the
just like,
arrangements?
when Alicia was like, okay, how should we go with the arrangement? Because you are the conductor, you'll be running this.
Girl.
I was like, just make sure it's badass. And it was badass. So
And
I
I know
influenced that.
with that particular one, it was an all woman.
Yes. Even the arranger was female.
Yeah, I
Bobby Jane
thought that was
Gardner.
absolutely
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah.
I'd love to get into a little of
Mhm.
that. Also, I mean, all synonymous with history, culture, as well as luxury and craftsmanship. The Woman King, Rupert and Rothschild, and Ferrari are just some of the performances, arrangements, orchestras she's conducted
Mhm.
in those particular spaces.
Mhm.
She holds a master's of architecture from my alma mater, the University of
Hey.
Witwatersrand. Did you get the edge? Did you find the edge? Did
Yes. Oh
it?
my goodness.
This
Like
is
it
the
was,
edge.
it is, right? But it was like a tough journey. I mean, you know Vits, right?
I know
You
this.
know Vits, right? So it was like a tough journey to get to the end, which was my end was literally just now in December
Mm.
when my thesis was like greenlit and I was like, thank God I'm done.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And you've done that.
Mhm.
You've pursued this in honor of your late mom, Umam Pearl Matsidiso Pitse. So,
Mm.
what was your research topic?
It was Spirit of Place, demystifying the significance of sangomas in our culture, in our communities and well-being, while signifying their relevance in urban spaces.
Wow.
So that's why
Hair
it
just stood
got
up.
it got turned down many times because I mean
It
that
was
is
challenging a
it was
lot of.
challenging because you are talking about liminality, you're talking about spirituality, you don't get enough of archival material. So in terms of
Mm,
precedents, in terms of research, I had to just dig things from places that I did not even know I had to dig from because it
yeah.
was like, okay, but how are you going to do this? This is such a hidden topic. So it was very difficult to sort of like unearth that topic. So yeah.
And how did the topic itself come to you?
It really came from my understanding or my interest in African belief systems and indigenous knowledge systems as well. Because I was like, if we are Africans, what really makes us African, right? And in my quest of finding out what makes us African and all that, I went into the traditional aspects, right? The
Mm,
spirit of us as Africans, and I tied that into how a space has a spirit. So there's a spirit of
of
place,
place,
right? And
correct.
how to do that architecturally, I had to draw from how sangomas, traditional healers, even masters of the pedagogue of
Mm.
indigenous knowledge, your credo mutras and stuff, how they
Oh,
interpreted
love Credo.
exactly, right? So how they
Yes.
interpret space, and there are various spaces in South Africa that I looked into. One of my favorite is the Freedom Park,
Mm.
by Mashaban and Rose Architects. Also, there was a collaboration with Studio MMA, and I sat with the architect actually from Studio MMA, Peti Morajele, and I was like, how did you do this? And we got into how, as Africans, we define spaces, how,
Yeah.
in the hierarchy of our spaces, you always had the king or the chief at the very top, at the mountaintop, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you had everyone else who stayed at the bottom. So it was him at the top and then his protectors, and at the bottom was just village dwellers or
Yeah.
whatever, right? So there was always a hierarchy in how we determine spaces that connected us to the higher power, to the sky
Mm.
and to the ground.
And the respect for that hierarchy, right?
Yes.
I love that. I
Mm-hmm.
love that. Love that. Love that.
Mm-hmm.
Congratulations on completing that.
Thank
And
you.
I don't know how you did it with all your plans, your travels, your work.
Full time. It was a full time degree, and I was a full
Wow.
time conductor. I don't know how I did it.
Well done. You
Thank
should
you.
really. It's. I think it's the true spirit of a history maker,
Mm-hmm.
boundary stretcher, whatever
Mm-hmm.
you want to call it,
Mm-hmm.
because you really have transcended. And I
Yeah.
think for me, reading even and researching, the sense that I got that you're constantly transcending yourself,
Mm-hmm.
which is quite beautiful.
Yeah.
I love this. A creative visionary enchanted by the African continent.
You know.
What is your enchantment with this beautiful continent? Particularly, I think you have a unique lens also from an architectural eye,
Mm-hmm.
which is very spirited in itself because
Yeah.
you're able to look at, and we were just having this conversation with Mambutla as well, to
Mm-hmm.
say, space and place and
Yes.
its context in relation to us as Africans.
Mm-hmm.
So, what is your particular enchantment
Mm-hmm.
with Africa?
I always believed that Africa has always been majestic, right? I was even
Mm,
telling you earlier just now that I recently found out that the harp, right, it originates from Egypt, right? And
mm,
when you look at the biblical context of the harp, it is the very instrument that brought in the presence of
It
God. And
ushered
even
in,
Lucifer, right,
yeah,
was shunned from heaven because
he
of
was a
his
harp
powers.
player.
Yeah, he
He was
brought in
able
the
to
presence.
summon.
Even his body had some of the strings of the harp. Like, that's how
Oh,
connected he was to
wow.
this instrument, right? And when he realized that power, that's when he was sort of like excommunicated from heaven, because it is such a powerful instrument, right? So when I got to find out that this harp instrument comes from Egypt, it further confirmed
Mm,
that everything spiritual and sonic and transcended and
mm,
mystical for me, it
mm,
really comes from Africa, right? And in my quest of wanting to incorporate African instruments or the African language or the African narrative in the work that I do musically,
mm.
I got to, go into this rabbit hole and find out certain things. And I was just
We
like,
love a rabbit
what?
hole.
Yeah, I
An,
was
an
like, there's
educational
no
one,
way.
anyway.
Exactly. I was like, there's no way this instruments come from Africa. Even the flute. The
Mm,
flute in its natural
mm.
form was a wooden instrument, and
Yeah,
then it got transformed in Europe and whatever into now this metal.
as it often does.
Exactly, right. It was then this metal instrument that had a name, that had valves and all that, but a
Mm.
lot of things jumped off in Africa. So that's my enchantment in understanding that we had this
We're
thing all the
magic.
time. Of course,
We are
it's
magic.
always been us.
It still is us.
Yeah, yeah.
And what dreams, particularly with your work, do you then have for contributing to how the majesty of Africa gets restored?
Mhm. So with the work that I do, I mean, in the beginning, it was like quite a long process of trying to figure out what type of conductor was I going to be, because there's various
Mm,
conductors, right,
okay,
across the
teach
world, right?
us.
Yeah, so I mean, the conducting academic approach is that you go to school, you're taught how to do Mozart, how to do Beethoven, how to do Shostakovich or Dvorak, and
Mm,
learn all the styles, and how classical music was prominent in Vienna and all these things, right?
mm.
But then you are not really taught about the African
Yeah, I
aspects
was
of it
waiting for you
all.
to mention some African
Exactly, right? So,
forms of music
exactly, right.
within
So,
that.
I think how my brain works is that I always want to break things apart. I mean, even with architecture, is the only art form where you have to break things apart in order to put them together.
Hmm.
So I saw that, and it's like, let me break this apart and actually figure out why we don't hear a lot of Africa in all of these. Even in academia, even in your
Yeah.
institutions, they don't tell you that there's the likes of Professor Mziliga Zukumalo, who wrote
Mm,
an entire opera
wow.
centered around the story of Shaka Zulu, the greatest warrior to have ever lived. And when you look at that opera, it's literally written in the same structure, notation, and prowess as your Tchaikovsky, and
Wow.
those are the things that you don't get at the library, at Wits or whatever. So it's just like, you don't
They'll,
get it at the Wits library at
yeah.
Wotanwala. You don't get this at Wotanwala, right?
Mm,
And then I was like, shucks, I want to dig deeper into this. So fortunately enough, Mziligas Kumala used to go to my church, right? And I was like, oh,
mm.
so he was born a salvationist, right? So that's how I
Yeah.
got to understand how his mind worked and all that. So because of that, I was like, hang on, the only way I'm going to understand this is if I reach out to these arrangers and these masterminds of this genre,
Truly
who
masters.
speak Africa again. They don't just orchestrate, but they speak Africa. So even in the languaging of these songs, how they are sung operatically, there's a certain approach that's very different to the Western. There's a certain
Mm.
approach to how you
As in our
pronounce.
African opera approach is
Yes,
vastly different, I
of
imagine.
course. So when Mzilikazi Khumalo's song Izibongo Zika Shaka, when it says udlungwane kandaba, udlungwane umbelebele, oshaka kashayelo, nodlume hlezi kamenzi, there's a certain way that they have to enunciate and pronounce the vowels and the consonants
Ah,
that you
wow.
are not taught when you go to the conservatoire schools in Italy, So it's an
Mm.
African thing, and it ushers in and sort of like carries the story. So this is really based on a lot of research that I was like, because this
Yeah.
exists, I think I want to showcase it to the rest of the world. So that's how it came about, where I had a different vision for African the arts within the space that I'm in.
That is phenomenal. And
Mm-hmm.
this conversation is particularly compelling to me because, especially what you're mentioning, and I'm from KZN,
Mm-hmm.
and you'll know KZN has the likes of Abambongeni Ngema,
Of
and
course.
my uncle, in fact, my dad's older brother
Mm-hmm.
was a professor of music,
Mm-hmm.
and he directed the Playhouse Company amongst
Mm-hmm.
various other roles.
Mm-hmm.
My dad was in theater, so I love and I understand the impact that arts have had in my life.
Mm.
And I love how you're making it tangible to us by
Yeah.
bringing it closer,
Mm-hmm.
particularly because you always see very old people.
Of course.
You always see very old, wise
Mm-hmm.
people that are sort of retiring into
Mm-hmm.
the space.
Yeah.
I love that you're making it closer, more youthful, because also we've got musical geniuses that are amongst us, even in the genres that we're seeing more contemporarily. So love, love, love. I love just the clarity that you have as well, with where it comes from. Because my next question actually was going to be, how does somebody go from architecture to music? Keen to understand that.
There's a lot of people who are fighting. Who'll be like, why did you leave architecture? Like, how do you go from architecture to music?
Well,
I
I
was like,
suppose you haven't left
I never
architecture.
left architecture. It's just that I'm not working 9 to 5 for, one of the big fives in Sandton or whatever, or Cape Town, right? My interpretation of music is so architectural.
Structured.
Yes, right? Even the principles that exist in architecture, there's structure, there's texture, right? There's movement, right? There is color.
Yeah.
Right? There is the timbre. There's also how you enter into music, how you exit into music, how you enter into a building, how you capture people, and how you design a building. So when people come into a house, is it your kitchen? Is it your lounge? How do they flow? Is it going to be open plan? Do you have walls, right? Do you have partitions? Do you have screens? So because of my understanding of architecture, that's literally how I look at music. I'm like, how do I keep people at a certain movement of the song, right? And I see it architecture because I'm like, okay, floor to, ceiling heights. There's a certain understanding of what makes people comfortable when they get into a space, right? So I literally bring those out in music, and I think that's what makes me unique, because that's not how these guys do it. Of course,
I think the one feeds the other in such a beautiful symbiotic way, because I can see how architecture can feed your music, because also the art form that you're in is quite a scientific, and it can quickly become very mundane actually, if you don't have a unique lens to it. Because I mean, it's like when you encounter art for the first time, whether it's fine arts or whatever, you're just like, it's just a bunch of strokes. But with time, as you get into it, there's you understand the hues and the significance of color and the language of like different mediums that the work is painted on or captured on. So, okay, you've answered my question, because I was like, this young woman,
how does it work, right?
Yeah, but I can see as you explain it, and I can just see you light up as well with just the clear view that you have on this.
Yeah.
So in the African context and throughout our history, music has its foundation in material sources such as archaeology, pictorial sources, like drawings, rock art, and illustrations that have been traced and tracked back, as well as the other oral sources such as, language, travelers' accounts, inscriptions, different basically sources. And you and I were speaking about archiving and the importance, or at least in the African context, the deficit thereof. And I particularly enjoy the fact that, I mean, with the research work that you've now undergone, you are able to contribute to that world in terms of history, and also contributing academic knowledge, as well as just to the archives, essentially, because your work now forms part of the archive. So how has this gone into really the conducting, the arranging, and the curating of music? Because I find that yours is quite experiential. So how have you caught on differentiating yourself in that way? Because as you're creating music, it's being archived, or as you're conducting or arranging or producing, it's being archived. I mean, do you write the work yourself? What is the process?
So I mean, in terms of the work that I do, I understood when I ran, through difficulty. I came through a lot of like a difficult stop. So I was just like, okay, but where can I read about this? Or where do I go? And then I was like, it's important for me to create like a repository of knowledge, right? With the architecture that feeds into the music and the experiential. sort of like benefits of that are reflected in my work, right? So with the architecture, the reason why my thesis, my research topic was so intense, because I was like, I want someone who would not get this anyway to go through this and be like, oh, this is what it is. So that's why there's even me going into Sangoma's hut and figuring out, okay, what does this do? And documenting that, right? So there's like even links in my thesis document where you play that link and it shows you what this means, what that means, and how all these things are connected, right? And I feel like because I understand the connectivity of all of these things, they help me interpret what I do and how I do it, right? So in terms of how I interpret music or how I think when it comes to that, right, is based on that. So because of the academia, and I think you'll understand it, I think once you're an academic,
I get it.
Oh my goodness, it becomes so embedded in you, right? So a lot of what I do is research-based. So when I get a project or an idea, I do research, right?
Yeah.
I look at, okay, how does this look? I look at precedent studies, who has done this? And if no one has done it, how do I draw reference from people who exist closely enough to this space, right? How do I form a theoretical underpinning, right, of that?
Take me through it.
Yes, how do I form a theoretical underpinning, right, of, even if you were to ask me, okay, how does this relate to a classical master? I'll be like, oh yeah, I mean, Mozart, there was a period in his life where he got to almost the end of his career or his life where he was trying to be unconventional. And then you ask, what does that mean? I was like, it is in the way that he wrote his opera. Like La Nozze di Figaro was him trying to give power to the servants, right, at the time, right? And then giving them a voice. And the I think it was the royal family or whoever was, I think it was the
monarch or something.
The monarch, right, was like, no, obviously this is, unconventional. You're trying to overturn the current rule of the state, whatever. And then he was like, no. So even Mozart had like an unconventional vision casting of the future type of way of thinking, but that was not accepted, right? So then I can form an argument to say that the reason why I can think this way is because there's the likes of Mozart, there's the likes of Stravinsky, who was best friends with Pablo Picasso, right? That was just, I mean, come on, that was just, and so it makes you understand why his operas are the way they are, right? So then after research, I'm like, okay, who do I need? I always want to have the best of the best people in the teams that I form, right? Who will sort of like help me get to where I need to get to creatively. So I look at who those people are and then I collaborate, whether it's I need a choir, I need a vocal coach, I need a musical arranger, and then we create. But I always come up with the concept development of what the idea is and then relay to them. And then at the end, we have the product.
Magic.
Yeah, we have magic.
It really is phenomenal just to, because we see it come together and we see this culmination of so many facets that you're now breaking down for us.
Yeah.
And I mean, how has African music, musical sound, and practices of our indigenous people, and I mean, you've spoken about Izangoma, so maybe you can take us there, or for the benefit of my listeners that are not Zulu or South African,
Sure.
Izangoma would be traditional healers.
Yes.
And I'm sure there's an iteration of traditional healers, whichever part of the continent or the diaspora that you come from. And for the benefit of our Western counterparts, I suppose it's just traditional medicine and healing practices. How has that informed, when we look at classical music, where are you seeing, for example, the juxtaposition of our traditional indigenous practices and people, and just like also because there's izangoma ziyagida. I mean, there's the summoning of spirits, and there's the drum, and there's specific and different instruments that are just beautiful and evocative. How are you seeing that, particularly because you said you're not seeing it documented in academic books, and I imagine, which was quite a talent for your teachers or lecturers, because they like, can she not just pick
literally
something easier?
My supervisors, no, but they get intrigued by this thing because it's just like your other peers are giving us, we're going to do like a children's home, we're going to do like a retirement village. You want to go into how sangomas interpret, like how do they conjure up certain things, how that informs spaces. You are going into sangoma's heart, seeing all of this medicine that they're telling you, listen, I can send this to someone's house now. You're like, what? You are going in and getting your hands
Yeah.
dirty for the sake of academic understanding. And this, like I was saying, this archival importance of our culture and the understanding of liminality, because those are the type of things, that's spirituality. You cannot get in the book.
It is.
You have to experience it and try to
Right.
document it. So
And
most of them
even
liked it.
then, you cannot really grasp the
Yes,
fullness of it.
exactly. So I would say my vision for orchestra, right? When I got into, okay, what type of conductor am I going to be? I wanted to be a different conductor, right? And I was like, I know it's going to be difficult because it has to be a trial and error type of thing. So after doing a lot of research, I was like, how do I incorporate African instruments in an orchestra, which is very Eurocentric,
Yeah.
right? You have your violins, you have
Which is
your...
very neat.
Yes, put together. They went to school, right?
Yeah.
They went to school. They have, obviously, the academic, paperwork or whatever to show that they are very well learned. Then you get to Africa, right? And then you're like, okay, these guys, they play based on spirit. They didn't go to school.
And music, the highest power of music is to evoke spirituality.
Yes, of course, right? And then, like you were mentioning, there's ukit or whatever. And once you understand that in Africa, we have different drum patterning that evokes certain things, whether it's a ritual, whether it's a celebration, there's different drum patterns that make us understand what sonic movement this means. Like if you want to celebrate, if you want to evoke, if there's mourning, we understand that in Africa, right? So I was like, okay, which African instruments do I want to add into the orchestra? And again, with the help of my mentors in the conducting space, it was a trial and error. I was like, okay, I want to use a kora, right, which is from East Africa, right? It's, Gambia, Guinea-Bissau, that's where the kora comes from, right? How do I incorporate in the orchestra? And they were like, okay, we did a bit of research on that. And they were like, actually, the kora fits in between the viola and the cello in an orchestra. I was like, what? It was like, yeah,
because those are string instruments, right?
Yes, exactly.
I don't know what a kora looks like, but is it a string?
Yes, so it's that instrument that is sort of like round and it has strings like this. So a player will put it like this, right? Okay. And then play the strings like that.
Yes, I've seen that.
Yes, so that's African, right? So that's what I was saying. Guinea-Bissau, Gambia, that's where you're going to find the kora. East Africa, Senegal as well, right? So I was like, oh, so if you place it between the viola and the cello,
it marries.
Yes, so there's a space for this kora in the orchestra. And then I was like, okay, what percussive instruments can we add into the orchestra that speak Africa? And then we did a bit of homework with that. And it was like, hey, there's your sabah drums, there's your ndundun drums, and they have the similar drum texture and depth as your timpani, your bass drum. So all of these Western instruments, right?
Are able to.
Exactly. So the juxtaposition of me saying, okay, I want to see how this works. So there was an event I had, private event with, I don't know if I can mention the brand name.
Please do.
Okay, Bidvest. So Bidvest, right? They came to me, they were like, Ofentse, if we were to come to you and say, imagine if Beyonce came to you and wanted to do an African type of Coachella, what would you do? And I was like, shucks, African Coachella, it has to have an African orchestra. Right. And that's why I was like, okay, I think my idea. So
just
now,
even, sorry to cut you there, just even you mentioning African orchestra sounds like a concept that's foreign. So foreign. Because orchestra is automatically, it's Western, it's Eurocentric, it's neat, it's classy, it's classic.
It's well learned.
It's well, yeah.
Exactly right. It's not unconventional. It's very neat, right? So I was like, it has to be an African orchestra.
The introduction of language.
Exactly. So the academic aspect of me, I was like, okay, I've done my research. Now I have to prove it practically, right?
Yeah.
So I put this 35-piece orchestra together, and then I had 3 choras, all African. Right, these are all African guys, right? Who this is an instrument, this is a knowledge that's passed down from father to son. So they are like 6th generation griots in the kora. When it comes to the kora, like you can't go to school for a kora, right? So and then I had this percussion section where I had these drums from Africa that are made from other African skin, all of these African skin hides, whatever, that are these drums are only made when there's a ritual, when there's a death, when there's a coming of age. So you can't just buy it. You can't order it. You can't, it's not like a Shein order, right?
Yes. Oh, not Shein.
It's not like a Shein order. Like you literally, they represent something that was done.
Yeah.
There
They
has
have
to be a
historic
shedding.
depth.
Thank you. There had to be a shedding of blood. There had to be a slaughter for this thing to come together, right? So you have these guys. So during rehearsal, you have these guys who can read the scores, right? Now, these guys who don't read, it's all
Who
spirit.
don't read music.
Literally, I had to be like, Cora, I need you to give me a doom, 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 doom.
I love that you can go there with it because you
Exactly.
could also just be so rigid about it
Of course.
and say if they don't read music, how are we going to even ever have an African orchestra?
So I had to come barefoot with that because I was like, how am I going to do it? So when first rehearsal, I did that, and client was like, how did it take us so long to have something like this? I was like, maybe you guys needed me to cover the scene. I don't know.
Some spaces are just reserved for some of us to come in and fill.
Exactly.
In order it's that boundary shifting that I keep mentioning.
Yeah.
With you. And African music has undergone frequent and very decisive changes throughout the centuries. And we're seeing that happening now with contemporary genres such as the amapiano. What is your view? I mean, what is your view on this global phenomenon that amapiano has become? What is your view? And I see the brand of music that it's become. I see it in the same state as even the classical musics and other very notable genres. From the work that you do, I mean, you're constantly shifting and breaking boundaries. Is there anything in the pipeline with regards to collaborations across genres? Because I know that you've typically lived in classical, jazz, as well as gospel music.
Yeah.
That's been really your residence when it comes to music. So looking at other genres like amapiano, kwaito, or, even globally, or even across the continent, other beats, Afrobeats. What because we're seeing this constant and frequent evolution essentially of music, which I think will be pervasive throughout,
of course,
life, humanity. So what in your view are there possible collaborations on the pipeline? What is the marriage or the potential of collaboration and partnership with you across different genres?
So, I mean, I consider myself as a businesswoman who offers orchestral experiences as a product, right? Okay. So, in my understanding of that was where the shifting of the needle always came into play. So I was just like, okay, if I'm offering these orchestral experience as a product and I'm trying to break barriers constantly, right? Just like in theater, they say, an actor adapts. I was like, okay, and a conductor has to adapt, right? So with the various things that I've done, I mean, the first big concert that I had was Judas Puma. That's Afro jazz, right? Judas Puma. After that,
the amazing, the glorious,
the phenomenal, the inimitable.
Whoa.
My goodness, right? Judas Puma, Afro jazz. Who would have thought? Conducting Afro jazz, right? And then I did a collaboration with Sun Al Musician.
Yeah.
That's Afro-tech. Afro-tech, you understand? So we were there and I had to understand the music. I had to understand the nuances and be able to conduct it in such a way. Because when you get into those spaces, you also artistic direct, right? Yeah. So you have to figure out how to marry the two worlds. And then Alicia Keys, that's pop.
Yeah.
All right?
Yeah.
Alicia Keys.
So you're doing it already?
I'm doing it already. It's just a continuation of how I'm doing it, right? So you spoke about amapiano, right? So yeah. I'm trying to see if I should answer from a purist point of view. Or as like
as authentically as you're feeling in this moment.
The purists of classical music will just let you know that amapiano. They'll be like, amapiano is not music. It sounds monotonous. There's no structure or whatever. So it's kind of I've tried to find a bit of a footing when it comes to that, right? So that's why there's certain artists in the genre that I'm like, listen, these are musicians. They are impeccable in their interpretation.
The training helps. I think your background and your training helps. I mean. I just look at Azek's Bandwini, who's an academic himself,
of course,
and obviously has gone on to do phenomenal things in music. There is something very different about his music, I'm sure, amongst others.
Yes,
of course,
yeah. So in my understanding, I was like, oof, it has to be like an artist that I'm just like, we can do something together, right? So you're asking what interesting things
collaborations in the pipeline.
Yes, so there's a very exciting project that I'll be doing soon with Gabs the Small, with Red Bull. Yes, Red Bull Symphonic, which is this global asset that Red Bull has where they pair a prominent conductor with a big artist of a certain genre. So I
Mm.
believe it's 4 years ago they had like Rick Ross, but they've been having it in different regions in the world. I think there's one that they had with Pitbull as well, who's a rapper.
Yeah.
And then the most recent one they had last year, I think October, was with Metro Booming in Atlanta, I believe. So Metro Booming, and the conductor was Anthony Panther, one of my favorite conductors, right? So they were like, Ofentse, we bring it to South Africa,
Girl.
and are you keen? I was like, I mean, let's go, right? So, I mean, even with them, they want to push the needle because, like you're saying, Amapiano is the biggest export right now. We have
Absolutely.
Tyler, who's literally been having her foot on everyone's neck right now.
Tyler is, girl,
Tyler, I
plate,
mean,
crumbs, everything eaten.
Tyler is, and I think she's been ready for this, right? And that's why the preparation, and I think the team that she works with, is very important to have a team that believes in your vision, and
Right.
they also understand the planting period of your career, so that when it gets to this point, you are ready, right? So I'm very excited to do the show with Gabza. It's going to be at the Lyric Theatre.
Oh my God.
Right, 33-piece orchestra.
Do we have dates?
8th of June, with a possible 9th of June as well. So it'll be happening at
We
the
call it
Lyric
4th.
Theatre.
We call the 9th of June 4th.
Happening on the 8th and 9th of June, Lyric Theatre, featuring this 33-piece badass orchestra.
Yeah.
8-member choir. So this is, like my, again, curated experience of myself and Gabza. And it's been a phenomenal experience because, like I'm saying, for me, it always blesses my soul when I can sit with an artist and we can go through each and every song, right? And go through each and every instrument in a song. And then I can also take out the structures and I can be like, this guy's actually musical,
It's
right? I mean, the way
musical.
that Gabza interprets music, it's like in sonata form. So there's a form in
don't remember.
Oh, you know
Sonnets.
sonata. Yes, right? Exactly. So,
Jeez, umunini umuntu afunda.
oh, guys, like the academia will never leave, right?
No.
I literally looked at it. I was like, this is sonata form type of writing. And even in its minimalist, like his music is minimal, right? But you have that structure where it's ABA, or ABC. And then he will take the A again. So it's like ABC and then to coda or dulcet it goes to the front again. And it was such an exciting thing to have a conversation with him where I'm explaining my world, he's explaining his world, and we're like, okay, how are we going to bring how are we going to bring you and I and showcase African prowess? Because we're also trying to showcase the spirituality in our music, right? And it was just like, okay, how do I do it with my knowledge as a conductor? Because I'm conducting the show, right? So I have to emulate what he wants also as the owner of this music, essentially. So it's going to be so exciting. It's going to be an hour 45 minutes of pure magic. So you can imagine with his catalog which songs we're going to be doing, right?
Really?
Yeah,
It's gonna be. You said African prowess. You had me at African prowess. So I'm there. And two because again, I think this is what has distinguished Gabza. And you are able to articulate it musically because you know the art. But this is what we as consumers are hearing that's very different to his music.
Exactly.
Is just like an understanding and something deeper, I suppose. Well, really, you are in the business of art. You are in the business of music. You are in the business of arts, of the arts. How did you equip yourself to just get into business, to run the aspects of owning and managing your own orchestra and everything that comes with it? Because you're here with your manager. You guys have obviously a lot of stuff on the go.
Yeah.
How is it that you structured the business? Because I think artists, and I'm born from artists. Artists, they just want to focus on the art.
Yeah, we just want to
and
create.
not the business.
We just want to create and live in the creativity. Just literally lock ourselves up, be in the studio, be in the in our natural habitat, and do what we have to do.
So how did you bring the business aspect when you decided because obviously like you said, you're entrepreneurial and you're in the business. You're a businesswoman. How did that process happen?
I mean, I have an amazing management team, right? who know what they are doing, right? I mean, when we first met and came together, it was like I was presenting a whole different world to them, and they were like, okay, we have to learn how your world works, because it's like orchestra, classical music. There's these instruments, there's these sections in an orchestra, and we have to understand all these things. So they were very open to learning, right? And because of them being very forward thinking and amazing in the work that they do, they brought the business aspect of it. But my understanding of the entrepreneurial significance and importance of what I do comes from my mom. Like my mom was selling Avon, Justine. So there was also the entrepreneurial element.
There was always business happening in the
There was
home.
always business happening in the home, besides her being a teacher. So there'll be people coming to the house and she'd be like, okay, oh, Smamang is coming. Please give her this at 5. Okay. And then she's going to give you 250. Okay. And then whoever's going to come again, she's going to give you 300 for this perfume. Okay, chef. So it's like that exchange and that trade that I got to see that, oh, okay, this is what entrepreneurship is.
You have to have something that people want to buy.
Of course.
And there's an exchange of something commercially valuable to you.
Exactly.
And the acquisition of
definitely
the product or the service.
Yeah, that's
or
where
experience.
I understood. That's where I understood that you need a team for these type of things, right? Because I'm a creative. I can just create and not understand that, listen, this is a business at the end of the day as well. You may love what you do, but you have to have people who are like 10 steps ahead of you, right? And then can support what you're doing as well and believe in what you're doing, because my team really believes in me.
Absolutely.
More times more than I believe in myself, and I'm just like, okay, how I'm going to do it? And then they believe that I can. So I think that's the whole importance of the work that I do, is that I have a structure that runs where there's those who answer emails, they can look at your email, right?
Mamputla,
and
my
answer
girl.
timelessly, right? Make sure that Ofentse tomorrow 10, I'm like, oh, shucks. And then I make sure that I'm here on time and all that. So I can be the creative and they can make sure that I'm where I need to be. And I also show up at the highest level without sort of like shortchanging myself or putting myself under pressure, because there's also the mental health and emotional aspect of my career where
that part.
Most part I'm just like, okay, I need to go recharge. So they understand my recharge moments when it's just like, okay, we don't have to overbook you. We don't have to have like an entire 3 interviews in a day, like an entire PR run. There's those days where we're like, okay, listen, you have to be off, do something, unplug. We're not going to call you. We're not going to message in the group chat, So because of that understanding, I'm able to soar, honestly.
I must commend them because they maintain your height,
of course,
in what you do.
Yeah.
And there's something distinctly, just particularly attractive, really, with how you're managed. And maybe it's because I'm a business person and I run brands.
Yeah.
And so you can see brands that are really well managed, whether they are brands in people or otherwise.
Yeah.
So how did you gain access to, on the topic of mentorship, how did you gain access to the country's greats and leading conductors like Tammy Zungu and Gavin Groeten?
So when I started, because I had access to your Instagrams, your Facebooks, there'll be people that I follow and I'm like, yo, I aspire to those people, like to knowing them, right? And being the overly ambitious young girl that my mom raised me to be, I would DM these people, DM'd a lot of conductors, right, at the time, because I really just wanted mentorship. I wanted people to show me the ropes. I just wanted people to help me cross to whichever other side, to the proverbial other side that I needed to go to. So it was Tammy Zungu, at the time, who was the head of music, TUT. Again, the academia is very important because it's more than just someone showing you how to wave your hands.
There's a greater appreciation.
Someone, who can give you, like academic books to read, who just be like, listen, you have to do this and then come back to me and then I have to give you a report. I'm just like, shucks.
Like bury your head in these books.
Yeah, you have to go through the research of...
You can't just YouTube it.
Nah, you can't, right? And then the same thing with Gerben, right? So Gerben was like, again, head of music at the time at UP. Okay. Right, and one of the best conductors, honestly, in Africa. He's of Dutch descent, so came to South Africa with his wife because they wanted to give back, right? So he had this whole tenor in Europe, right? And he has met one of my favorite conductors from the Berlin Philharmonic Orchestra. So because of his world knowledge, he was also a perfect pitch, like, perfect patch or, mix of the people that I need, complement of the people that I need on my side to help me be better than good enough. Because I'm young, I'm black, I'm female. You always need to have to be better than good enough because there's always someone there to check you.
Yeah.
There's really someone always there to check, to be like, you're just a pretty face. Can you really do Tchaikovsky's 1812 Overture? And I can't be like, what's that? I have to be like, let's go. Yeah, let's go. So these are the two giants that taught me how to really go for the jugular and did not see me as a girl.
Love that.
Yeah.
Because we transcend gender
Of
when
course.
we're moving in the spirit of what we're created to be.
Correct.
And the magic of just like service to humanity.
Mm-hmm.
What have you taken on any mentees? One, and two, what has their mentorship and tutelage helped you with? How has that helped channel your career and exposing you to opportunities? So my question is in two parts.
In two parts.
Do you mentor? Have you taken on any other
Not
mentors
really.
yourself?
I feel like I'm
You're
still,
still
in the
a
process.
student.
I'm still a student, very
and
much
then
so.
and then the first part of that being how do you feel their mentorship and tutelage has helped you expose, just shape, mold your career, but also expose you to opportunities?
Yeah. I believe that meeting Tammy Zungu as well as Herben, when I met them, right, they instilled, because there was a lot of fear, right, that I was like, first of all, I don't have a music degree. I don't.
Yeah, and you're speaking sonatas.
Thank you. So it's like, I don't have a music degree. I have the music gift. Or I'll understand music more than most people who have like diplomas or whatever, right? So they came in a time during my life where I was just like, I don't know what to do. And they were like, okay, let's show you. So they guided me in the steps of, number one, gaining the confidence, right? They literally told me from the onset that you're going to meet people, even in your own orchestra, that are going to be like, who does she think she is, right?
That are better academically,
that are well traveled in this field, right? So it's always like, you always have to know one better than them, or what you know has to always be enough, right? Because there's always going to be those things, right? And one of the important things that Herben taught me early on, that is what I believe has grounded me to this point. It was when the whole article came out of Ofentse Pitse, the first young Black female conductor to an all-Black orchestra. So I was having like interviews coming, left and right and center. And one time I had this interview during our session. I was like, Mr. G, there's a call that I have to answer for like 10 minutes, like a radio interview. So I'm going to need to just disturb our class, like our session, for 10 minutes. I was like, okay, cool. So this call comes in, right? I think it was one of the big radio stations. So I'm feeling myself, right? Because I'm just like, oh my gosh,
flower.
So I answer the call and, I'm speaking, and all these people that I'm big fans of, on the other side of the line are intrigued by my work. So I'm high up, right? So after the call, I end up, after the interview, I hang the phone and I'm just like, yo, Mr. G, like, aren't you excited that I'm here? He was like, yeah, sure. And I'm like, but like, why aren't you moved by this? He's like, no, I am. I'm proud of you, but I need you to know that it takes 10 years to be a very good conductor. So we have work to do.
We've just begun.
That leveled me. I was like, okay, so I still have time. So I constantly
We still have you in the oven baking.
Thank you. So even with the collaborations that I do, the work that I do, I always remember that I'm not in my 10th year. I'm constantly trying to get better and better and better and better and better and better. So that's what, back then, when he said that, I was like, okay. And the continuous ways in which during our sessions, he would remind me of, we still constantly have work to do, right? No matter who you're working with, no matter how many billboards you are on, you still have work to do.
I love the role I love that, because that's when mentorship wins.
Yeah.
Because it's somebody that really has gone ahead of you on the journey, who you might in fact transcend over time, because a true mentor is able to pour themselves out into the mentee, and the mentee becomes greater. But then the mentee is in turn able to do that. So I am also just reminded of Malcolm Gladwell's Outliers, the 10,000 hours, where you have to be you have to have conducted for at least 10,000 hours to have mastered the art, or 10 years in this instance. So success for me, I've always viewed as, purpose and passions meeting at a divine time. How for you have you merged your purpose as well as your passions, just to leverage the opportunities that you've been given? How do you constantly keep the purpose of what you're doing, but the passion as well, in tune?
I believe in answering that, I have to just say, I knew this was my purpose when, no matter how many times I've tried to run away from it, it'll
pursues you.
find me in the most like unprecedented ways and times, right?
Yeah.
And I'll just be like, there's no way this opportunity. Because I've said no, even with the Juris Puma show, I said no.
Mm.
I literally said no because I
Did you
was
say no
very.
because you felt you weren't ready? Did you say no? Why? Where did the no come from?
So at the time, right, I was admitted in hospital. I had just lost my mom like a few months before, so I was in hospital for severe depression and suicide ideation, right?
I'm so
I
sorry.
had, thank you, I had this concert in August of the same year where there's a sponsor that just let me down, went MIA. And again, I didn't have a team at that time, right? So I was very trusting, and the sponsor gave me that first yes that I needed to hear, right? Had the show with the whole orchestra, whole choir at Joburg Theatre, and it just went AWOL, like it just went down, right? Great show, right? But then things just went down. So I felt like such a failure, right?
Okay.
And having run this race for so long and having started this brand, I think it was 3 years prior to that, right? I just felt like I'm really letting these young people down, right? And not seeing the inverse of that. It's like, dude, there's no one who's done this, right?
Yeah.
But then, so it broke my heart and I was in hospital. So I got a call, right, in hospital from Bob Mabena and Masia Kumete, right? They were like, hey, Ofentse, remember when you came to studio this one time and you just needed help because of your orchestra? I was like, yeah. They were like, listen, Juris Puma is having a concert on the 1st of November, Empress Palace. It's called The Power of Dreams. We believe that your story will be so important to be showcased at the show. And then I was like, bruh, Bob, I'm sorry, I don't want to do it. He was like, yeah, but Ofentse, this is the chance, this opportunity. I was like, thank you, but I can recommend some, conductors, black conductors, but they're not female and they're not Ofentse Pitse, but I can recommend some guys. And he was like, you know what? Let me give you until 4 p.m. Right? The day goes. I had already decided that, I don't want to do this, right? He calls again at 4 p.m. Right? He's like, have you decided? I was just like, yeah, I'm not grand. I just feel like I've given so much to this craft and just lost my mom. Like, let me just go be a corporate girly. I have a degree, guys.
Something.
Like, I don't need to be doing this.
Yeah.
I don't need to be doing this. And then he was like, okay, hold the line. On the other line, right? On the other side of the line was Mom Judith, right? Oh. She was like, Ofentse, I've never seen you hold a baton. I've never seen you conduct, but there's something in me that tells me that I need to help you. And I was like, so I mean, she represents that generation of my mom. So out of respect, I agreed. I was like, okay, so then we had the show, right? And then it was amazing, it was phenomenal. And then again, with that, it showed me that this was my purpose. So the more I did it, I grew this love that transcended more than, it was bigger than me, because you go to rehearsal and you see these young people, or you see musicians who are like, thank you. Even when I was in London last year doing the Alicia Keys project, I was with a number of phenomenal musicians who play for your big orchestras, your London Symphonic, Symphony Orchestra and stuff. They came to me and were like, thank you. And I was like, what does this thank you mean? It was more of a thank you for seeing us.
Yeah, representation.
You know what I mean? Because I even mentioned that I feel like we are riding on our ancestors' backs. So that's why when these thing comes, I'm always like, it always is a confirmation when people say thank you, or when I'm in spaces where people are like, we've never experienced this. And then I'm like, this is really my purpose. So I think the marriage of that was me. As soon as I understood that this is a calling, a purpose, I was like, okay, I have to now really be fully into it, right? And see this as I'm really doing this now. And hence I was speaking about the importance of my team. Then they help craft my journey when it comes to this purpose and this gift.
It's a constant purging of yourself.
Of course.
Because unfortunately, the burden of a calling is knowing that the beating and the lashings might be on you, like the depression and all of it. Yeah. But really, it's knowing that you choosing to lie horizontal and not stand up. The cost on humanity is so dire. We're winding up now, and what role have relationships played in the trajectory of your career?
It's interesting. What kind of relationships?
Not romantic relationships, darling.
Because I'm being rocked all the time. No. If you really want us to talk about this, I'm gonna need something strong
for breakfast. No, it's just like relationships. People that, like Bob, Mom Judith, people that have endorsed you, people that have believed in you, people that have pushed you on when you didn't feel like going on. Because I think we undermine the value and the equity of relationships, and what they do for us in one person leading you to the next, or one introduction leading you to the next, or one person referring you to the next. So what for you, I mean, in the trajectory, and even how the opportunities or the business comes to you, whether it's, the Rupert and Rothschild or the Ferrari or whichever projects, the big Netflix projects that you're working on, what role have relationships played? Because I just want somebody listening to this to get to really go to their phone or be confident to DM people that they follow, because we're here because I was bold enough to reach out to say, I'd really love, your story is so compelling to me and I don't know enough about it. I'd really love to have a conversation. So, and it's relationship we had to foster, that I had to foster with your management team first. And for you, what role have relationships played?
I feel like relationships are the reason why I'm here. They say that your network is your net worth. So definitely from the very onset, it's been like a common thread of this relationship led me to this person, led me to that person, led me to that person, right? So it's been like a sequence of relationships, right, that have brought me to where I am. And there's been a transition phase in every step of my career. We've understood that certain relationships that brought me to this first step won't be the same relationships that are going to bring me to the second. And the second, maybe I have to, not really have the same relationships. But in everything, I've also understood that there are destiny helpers that come into our lives to help us get to our destiny, right? So I feel like I'm at a point where all of this combination of all these relationships have brought me to this level ground that I'm on, right? That's going to help me soar. So it was very important to foster all those relationships where someone can have a conversation about me in a boardroom that knows, like people who've never even been to the Linda Auditorium, they probably know classical music from their favorite movie, they probably don't even know all of these classical musicians who are just like, dude, don't you know Mozart? Don't you know Beethoven? That's like basic stuff, right? So it's been those people who trust in my judgment, right? And also trust in the fact that if they're like, listen, I spoke about you at this high-end table, and they say they're going to call you, are people who believe that I'm ready. Are people who are like, okay, I'm not going to use my name. And then it comes back and it's just like, bruh, like we've called Ofentse.
And she's non-responsive.
She's non-responsive. It's just like, it's people who know that by all means necessary, I know what time it is, right? So it's been those relationships that have gotten me as far as I've gotten. And in fostering those relationships, I've also understood the importance of sometimes you pay things forward, because there's people who have brought me to where I'm at, that never wanted anything in return. And it's like my responsibility to showcase to them when they see my success, it's my thank you, right? And it's a responsibility to pay it forward. That's why I answer DMs. I will, whatever platform you want to reach me on, I will answer you.
Even Zemjolo.
I'll just like politely be like, listen, I'm not interested. I'm not the target
but
market.
I love that you say you
may
answer
be.
DMs.
I do answer DMs. I do
because
answer.
I
comment.
you.
I comment on people's posts. So it's not a robot at the end of the post.
Because AI.
You need to feel my sentiments and me saying, oh, thank you so much for sharing this post, or because there's a lady who was like, she has a grandchild now who's a baby but wants me to be a mentor. I'm like, baby mentor, okay. I mean, she has to get to 6 years before I'm a mentor. Least. And then she was like, no, I want to start early. And I was like, if someone like that sees me as a mentor to a baby, I'm like, that's a big deal, right? So that's why my interaction, again, with people who follow the work that I do is important, because those are relationships. Those are people who are going to come to my shows, right?
And really, as we close now, we spoke about, you just mentioned the Linda Auditorium, and I used to live at that campus when I was at Wits. So I have fond memories. And I've actually taken my own kids to the Linda where they've been performing shows. Do you plan to go back home and play the Linda at any point?
Ooh, I would love to do the Linda Auditorium just as a
homage.
To check it off. Just to take it off my list. Or I would love to conduct something that's like a Wits thing, because I also believe that those are the same, streets that made me where I would go to class at John Moffat, have my trumpet case, right? Go to my tutor for like a session, right? Like a crit session. After that at 5, take my case, go, scan out of the gate at Wits, go down Mandela Bridge, go to Bree, get a taxi to Soweto. for a practice at church, so it's like
Wow.
Vitz has seen this case.
Okay.
Sometimes I will sneak in the choir at our studio just for a rehearsal because we didn't have another rehearsal space. I didn't have money to book rehearsal space. So I have really strong memories of how Vitz supported me, knowingly or unknowingly. I feel like Vitz saw me through it, right?
Yeah.
So would definitely love to do the Linda Auditorium. I mean, I'm having rehearsals soon at the Linda, but not a show.
Okay.
But I would love to do Linda, I think, just for...
We should curate something.
Let's go.
We should curate something together.
We should do that.
And I asked this last question to all my guests. What is your ultimate luxury?
My ultimate luxury is being able to order the nicest cafe mocha from anywhere in the world.
Ooh.
Yeah, I want to get to that point where I'm just like, anywhere in God's green earth, I can go there and get the best cafe mocha. Anywhere in the world.
And I have nothing more to say. But I appreciate that so much because it undermines. I'm saying to somebody else, it's just like coffee.
Yeah.
But to an enthusiast, it's an appreciation of the art, but being able as well to work and ascend to a point where you can in fact enjoy it from anywhere in the world.
Because I would need to go through.
Do you taste cafe mochas?
I do.
All over?
Yeah, I mean the hotels that I go to and stuff, like it's part of my rider. Like okay. I love the cafe mocha. So I've tasted a London cafe mocha. They'll ask you what type of milk you want, and I'm just like, just mocha. I don't know, like just make it basic cafe mocha. They're like, no, what type of milk? So that's how you know which level or which part of the world you're in,
appreciation,
right? When they ask you these certain details, right, that make you a well-traveled person when you understand how you answer to these questions.
A snob, let's put it plainly.
Yes,
right?
And
you must be a snob for the things that you love. So.
Of course.
Thank you. I think coming into this conversation, I really was humbled more than anything because it brings me full circle on my own experiences with growing up with artists. Always have a respect for artists. Like I said, my dad was a thespian. My uncles are in music. I've got family members and my own kids, in fact, also play. My son plays the sax and the piano. And the other one is he actually has he plays drum kit, piano as well as the African drum.
I think you should bring them to my show.
So I will. And we love. I mean, it's so crazy. Even when we watch an animated kids movie, I'm the girl that goes and downloads the music score, and the playlist and the soundtrack
to understand how everything was curated.
I'm such a like I watch the movie, but I'm more interested in the
intricacies,
so
the geeky parts.
Yes,
of course, the geeky parts.
And I had this to say, and I'd love to leave you with this as I go, and it's particularly something that I wrote about you to say. You're a beautiful story not yet fully told, a tangible reference of Africa's duality, an icon emerging. Girl,
I accept. I literally had a dream of what is this, Miriam Makeba last night, and I was playing the piano, and I was just like, shucks. And she was in my show. We're doing like sound check.
Wow.
So as you're saying that, like, I'm just like, I'm remembering these giants before me whose shoulders that I'm standing on. So I appreciate that.
You're an icon already, but one that will constantly be emerging. So move in that space. You're doing compelling work, and we're proud of you.
I accept. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a wrap.